This lesson is on the language models of NLP, the L or linguistic element of NLP. And you will remember this model from the foundation models of NLP. The structure of subjective experience, the basis of the presupposition, the map is not the territory. And in this model, which was created by a linguist, the concept that we generalize, distort and delete through language as part of the process of making meaning of our environment and therefore creating an internal representation or internal understanding of the external reality is core. So the process generalization, distort and delete is fundamental to language, and the language models use this deliberately to create different outcomes in terms of change in how people have constructed their maps. So the founders of NLP said language is both a representational system and the means or process of communicating our representation to the world. Not only do we generalize, distort and delete in order to make sense of things, by categorizing things, deleting things that don't make sense or that we're not interested in, and distorting things to fit into our assumptions. Not only do we do that, but we then have to use generalization, distortion and deletion as we attempt to communicate complex meanings from inside to others in the outside. So we take information in through this process and then we also bring up complex meanings and they become simplified and limited by what language is capable of. So that saying a picture says 1,000 words is true. With a picture, there's a massive amount of meaning, and someone would have to say 1,000 words to convey that. So in this sense, language is limited as the means of communicating. So the processes which we go through to communicate our experience are the same processes which we go through in creating our experience. It turns out that as you reveal the map by talking about the meanings you make, you can also change the map. So the original modelling projects that NLP was based in were very interested in how the incredibly extraordinary therapists of the time in the 70s were getting transformational results. All the therapists they looked at had different theories or frameworks, but these two things in common. There was a large amount of communication in the form of language with their clients, and as a result, there was a change in the client's representation or model of the world. So clearly they were doing something with language that helped people create changes in their internal representation. The first two that were modelled were Fritz Perls, the founder of Gestalt therapy, and Virginia Satir, the founder of family therapy. And from this modelling project, the meta model was created. The meta model is a model for listening and asking questions, particularly targeting certain things in what the client has said. So what you're actually listening for are types of generalizations, types of deletions, and types of distortions, and then you are asking questions that uncover or unravel and get to the deeper meaning beneath that limited language. So through this process, someone will say something, and through your questioning, they will become clearer and clearer and more conscious of the meaning they're making, where it comes from, how it makes sense. And by becoming conscious of it, they often make choices to change that meaning. So this is how the meta model can create a transformational conversation or a transformational change in how someone is creating meaning. It is an incredibly useful language model for coaches. This would be the language model of all three that I'm going to talk about that I would use most of the time as a coach, because you really are mostly asking questions of your client when you're in coaching and listening very intently. The Milton model is quite different to the meta model. It's different in its style and its intention. Milton Erickson, the Milton model is modelled on was the top hypnotherapist of the previous century and got extraordinary results in his hypnotherapy. He also had hypnotherapy accepted by psychiatry in the United States during his lifetime, so he was a very impressive figure. And he had quite a different style to other hypnotists. He did something called conversational hypnosis, which means that the trance was naturalized. It was a state that people went into very easily, and we go in and out of trance in our daily life all of the time. Every time we focus on the inside more than the outside, we are in a light trance. So we need to do this. It's part of our natural process to go in these cycles of attention out and attention in. And when our attention is in a trance, we are much, much more relaxed. In this, we are more open to receiving messages or accessing information from our own unconscious. So one of the lovely little metaphors for this is to say that if you were holding up a brick and you were holding very tightly with the effort to hold this brick up with the weight, and a feather were to land on the brick, you would not notice what it felt like for the feather to land. But if you have your hands out and there is no effort, if you are completely relaxed and a feather lands, then you fully notice what that feels like. And so it is with our state. When we are more relaxed, we are able to hear the smallest voice of our system, the littlest voices, not so much the loud voice of our conscious mind, of the part of us that is the thinker, but we're also able to hear and see pictures and notice sensations in our body and notice sounds, so things below language. So the Milton model is used to help people access more, to access the language below language of how we think, of how we do our internal process. When we use the Milton model as a practitioner, we deliberately use generalization, distortion and deletion to be extremely vague and actually also confusing. So the vagueness and the confusion are very deliberate because they guide someone into a state and they guide them to access their own meanings, their own information in their deep structure, and to be able to hear it and potentially change it whilst in that relaxed state. So the Milton model is often experienced as very gentle and relaxing by clients, but the changes that occur whilst in that state are changes that stick and make a really big difference. So it is a very transformational way to work. And I'll just give you a little example of saying something using the Milton model language so it makes a bit more sense. You may recognize it as the way people speak when they're doing guided visualization or guided meditations. And before we go any further, if you are operating a car or some machinery where you need to concentrate, and just need you to pause the audio recording because the Milton model is not to be listened to when you need to concentrate. So, as we enter this little demonstration of the Milton model, I'm going to ask you to just take a breath and clear your mind and relax. And I want you to know that I know that you are thinking certain things. And it's good to think those things that you're thinking, because it's those thoughts that you're thinking that are the first step to leading you to new insights and understandings. And the fact that you'll be coming to new understandings means that you can take your life in a new and powerful direction. And you can feel even more confident of the shifts that you're making. And every shift that you make at the unconscious level now can allow you to choose to do what you know at some level you really must. Deepen the relationship with your unconscious now. And you can. Can you not? And you are. Are you not? Going even deeper. Haven't you been? And one can attain the deepest depths of trance by simply taking a deep breath. That's right. And that's the best way to do it. And it's more or less the right thing to continue drifting as you are now. Because think about it. You're sitting where you're sitting, listening to the sound of my voice, and you're thinking those thoughts that you're thinking. And I don't know if that will cause you to make new connections immediately, or if the connections we made as you just continue to relax. Does that feel like something you can enjoy doing? And I could continue, but I think you have the idea that when we talk in the Milton model, it's slightly different. It's more melodic. It sounds with different volume. It's definitely not a whisper. So sometimes a stronger volume, sometimes softer, sometimes faster, sometimes slower. But it is compelling or interesting for the unconscious. It captures the attention of the unconscious. And there's so much more to learn about the Milton model, which we do in the NLP practitioner, along with practicing it and using it in many, many change processes. The NLP change processes often work with people in semi-relaxed states, going in and out, internally and externally, discovering things internally and then thinking about it externally. So the NLP processes use Milton model on and off very naturally. So it's not just about using it with scripts or guided visualizations. It's a way of speaking that's completely integrated with how many NLP processes work, which is with clients being in a relaxed state. Last but not least is the clean language model, which was modelled from David Grove in the 80s. David Grove was a therapist in New Zealand who was getting extraordinary results with clients who had experienced trauma simply by working with the metaphors that they raised themselves in their own language. So you may not notice this, but we use metaphors constantly in our language. The glass is half full or half empty. I've hit a wall. I'm on a journey. Like, it's constant. We're constantly describing things in metaphor. Sometimes phrases that are very common in our culture, and then sometimes things that are just completely unique. But when we need to express a lot, metaphor is often what we end up reaching for. And when people are attempting to create change in a deep level, there's a lot of complexity going on. So metaphor is quite often a frequent part of the conversation. With the modelling of David Grove, who built Clean Language, they discovered that you could use the client's own metaphors and a limited number of questions in a very specific vocal style that's similar to the Milton model. And as a practitioner, you could support the client to create deep change in their deep structure from within their own metaphor. So clean language feels very magical when it's fully in metaphor. It is as if the client is in a waking dream, and the change you're often seeing on the outside as they pass through quite intense feelings. Consciously, they may not know what the metaphor means, and this is key to the process, that as a practitioner you are not going to make any assumptions about what's good and bad, what ought to happen in their metaphor. When they say, I'm stuck down a well, you don't assume that the first thing to do is to climb out of the well. You ask them questions such as, and that well, is like what. So very different way of approaching metaphor than traditionally the NLP traditional approach. Plain language was normally only taught in NLP Master Practitioner, and it is so useful for coaching that it's taught in this coaching course. Many people that learn clean language integrate it into their style completely, whether or not their client is talking about metaphor, because as coaches we're always seeking to work cleanly and to keep our own map out of the client's material, and clean language is the most extreme version of that. I hope you enjoyed this module on the language models. The next one will be a little bit shorter, and it will be how do coaches use NLP.